Hey, this is section 2.1, the real number line. Our goals for today are to be able to graph and compare numbers and find the opposite and absolute values of numbers. Okay, so this is a real number line. The 0 is called the origin. Now notice that our numbers that are to the right of the origin are positive. And our numbers that move to the left are negative. So let's look at negative 2.3 and 1/2. Now when I graph negative 2.3, I'm going to go negative 2 and then a little bit more. So right about there is negative 2.3. Now when I graph 1/2, it's going to be between 0 and 1. Positive 1/2. Okay, now which number is smaller? Negative 2.3. Which one's larger? 1/2. Now let's compare the two numbers. First, let's look at it. Look at 1/2. So we would say that 1/2 is greater than negative 2.3. And then if we were to look at negative 2.3, we would say negative 2.3 is less than 1/2. Now opposites. Opposites are 2 points that are the same distance from the origin but on opposite sides of the origin. For example, negative 4 and positive 4 are opposites. What about negative 7? Well, positive 7 would be the opposite. What about 8? Well, negative 8 is opposite. Now, absolute value. Absolute value talks about the distance a number is from the origin, or the 0 on the number line. Now, there are two things we need to remember. The absolute value answer is always positive. Unless there's a negative sign outside the absolute value symbol. So the absolute value answer is always positive unless there is a negative sign outside the symbol. Okay, and the symbol is just 2 bars. So it would look like this. Absolute value of A. Okay, now let's look at a couple of examples. What's the absolute value of 2? Well, that's just 2. What's the absolute value of negative 6? 6. What's the negative absolute value of 5? Well, the absolute value of 5 is 5. Oh, then I've got this negative sign. So it's going to be -5. Be really careful whenever you have a negative symbol outside your absolute value bars. Okay, now let's look and see if we can find the see if we can find the possible values of x. The absolute value of x is 3. What can x be? Well, I know that if I take the absolute value of 3, I'm going to get 3. But I also know if I take the absolute value of -3, my answer is going to be 3. So I know that x is either +3 or -3. Now what about b? I've got the absolute value of x is equal to -5. Well, I thought that we said earlier that if I take the absolute value of a number that my answer is going to be positive unless there's a negative sign out front. I don't have a negative sign out here. So this one has no solution. There's no way that the absolute value of a number can give me -5 because I have no negative sign outside those absolute value bars. Okay, now let's talk about velocity. Velocity indicates both speed and direction. Up is positive and down is negative. Okay, so the speed of an object is the absolute value of its velocity. So the speed is the absolute value of the velocity. So if we have a space shuttle launch pad elevator drops at a rate of 10 feet per second, what is the velocity and what is the speed? Well, we would say that the velocity is -10 feet per second. We would say that the speed is +10 feet per second.